The phrase, "but we still haven't cured the common cold," is more than a complaint that we still have to suffer from a stuffy nose. It's emblematic of the fact that despite all of our medical advances, the cures for many illnesses still simply elude us. And that is certainly true of one of the oldest diseases known to man, one so terrifying that it is probably the genesis of vampire, werewolf, and zombie myths. Despite millennia of struggle against rabies, it is still one of the deadliest illnesses known to man. The history of the human contest with rabies deserves to be remembered.
Rabies is a type of viral encephalitis, that is, a virus that causes inflammation of the brain. Symptoms might include fever and pain, and as the virus attacks the nervous system, hyperactivity and excitable behavior, excessive salivating, confusion, and hydrophobia, strong fear of water. Rabies has sometimes historically been called hydrophobia owing to that symptom. And the symptoms represent a unique problem. The disease can only be diagnosed by its symptoms, but by the time those symptoms appear, it is already too late.
WebMD, and let's face it, that's where we all get our medical advice these days, says that if it is not treated before symptoms appear, it is deadly. Rabies has the highest mortality rate, 99.9% of any disease on Earth.
Rabies is most commonly spread by being bitten by an infected mammal, most commonly both historically and today, dogs, but also other mammals, including cats and foxes. That has been going on for a very long time. It is unclear just when and where rabies originated. A 2012 phylogenetic analysis published in the Journal of General Biology suggests that the current canine genotype of the illness might have been predated by another genotype. But the human connection, and by far most common way the illness is spread, is by being bitten by a dog, and dogs have been man's best friend for quite some time. But dogs' relationship with rabies might well have come first. The website History of Yesterday explains, the friendship between humans and dogs began approximately 33,000 to 40,000 years ago. And before the recording of history began, the dogs came into contact with the terrifying rabies virus. Rabies is one of the oldest diseases to have been recorded. A 2017 article in the Journal of Tropical Medicine and Infectious Diseases entitled 4,000 Years of Concepts Relating to Rabies in Animals and Humans points to a cuneiform tablet recording the Laws of Eshnunna, a Sumerian and later Akkadian city-state located in present-day Tel Asmar, Iraq, dating back some 4,000 years. If a dog becomes rabid and makes that authority known to its owner, but he does not watch over his dog so that it bites a man and causes his death, the owner of the dog shall pay 40 shekels of silver. That is a huge sum. The journal notes that the Code of Hammurabi lists the cost of a boat at just 2 shekels. More records are found in several so-called dog incantations, suggesting that these ancient people suspected that the cause was related to the dog's saliva, as well as medical texts from the era recognizing that once the person is infected, death is certain. In fact, the deadly nature of rabies might even predate these texts. Both Yama, the Hindu god of death, and Gula, the Babylonian god of medicine, are attended by dogs. While the etymology is uncertain, the word rabies, derived from the Latin word for madness, might itself have been derived from an ancient Sanskrit word meaning to rage. The journal article notes that the disease was described by several figures in classical antiquity, including Aristotle, Hippocrates, Pliny, Ovid, and Cicero, as well as Chinese texts dating at least back to the 3rd century A.D. The name of the genus that includes the rabies virus, Lyssavirus, is derived from the ancient Greek word for violence, Lyssa. Works in this period recognize that the disease was somehow related to the animal saliva and suggest prevention of the disease by taking steps to prevent people from being bitten. The 2nd century Greek philosopher Celsus suggested cauterizing a wound when bitten. Although the efficacy of the treatment is unknown, its practice continued into the 19th century.
According to veterinarian Fielding O'Neill of Richmond, Virginia's Tuckahoe Animal Hospital, Celsus also incorrectly suggested a cure for rabies by holding the victim underwater. Those that didn't drown died of rabies.
While these authors seem to well describe the disease's symptoms, like the ancient Babylonians 2 millennia before, they had no cure for a person who was infected beyond prayer. It isn't clear exactly how much effect the illness had on these societies, but the fact that their medical literature is so thorough on the subject suggests it was recognized as a significant threat. On August 18th, 180 BC, the Dowager Empress Lu of the Han Dynasty died suddenly at the age of 61, despite apparently being in good health. While the cause of her death has been a historical mystery, even at the time some connected her death to a dog bite the previous March, with one text writing, "The demon resembles a dog." Today it is widely accepted among scholars that her cause of death was likely rabies. Her death resulted in significant political turmoil in China, including the massacre of her clan. Rabies continued to be the subject of medical works in the Middle Ages. One common treatment in medieval Europe was to place the hair of the dog that delivered the bite, sometimes after being charred, into the wound, a cure first suggested by Roman naturalist and physician Pliny the Elder in the 1st century A.D. According to the medical dictionary at MedicineNet, that is the etymology of the term the hair of the dog that bit you, which refers to an alcoholic chaser that supposedly cures a hangover. Dr. O'Neill notes that while the hair of the dog might cure a hangover, it did nothing to cure rabies. In 9th century Belgium, the city of Liège became a center for the treatment of rabies, owing to the presence of the bones of St. Hubert, the patron saint of hunters. Prevention was accomplished by burning a dog with a heated metal key, called a key of St. Hubert, which was supposed to prevent the dog from becoming infected. Copies of such a key were also hung in homes to ward off the infection. Humans, once infected, were treated by, according to the Journal of Tropical Medicine and Infectious Disease, incision of the forehead and implantation of threads from the saint's supposedly miraculous stole, accompanied by prayers and fasting. The results were predictable. In fact, people exhibiting symptoms were often simply smothered to death between two mattresses to prevent their suffering the advanced symptoms and from infecting others. Such treatments actually might be administered precipitously, as the History of Yesterday notes. Sometimes they were overzealous in their attempts to prevent the spread of rabies. Individuals who had been bitten sometimes committed suicide or were killed by others, often without letting time pass to see if the person became symptomatic. In a bizarre twist, the journal notes that the potentially deadly role of saliva was put to use by 17th century Polish-Lithuanian artillery general Kazimierz Siemianowicz, who, in an early attempt at biological warfare, says to have fired hollow shells containing saliva of rabid dogs in 1650. The 2010 book Hospital Preparation for Bioterror writes, "It is unknown whether General Siemianowicz was successful with his tactical use of animal saliva." Despite the connection often made by writers of fiction between rabies and vampires, French veterinarian and microbiologist Jean Blanco notes that rabies in bats was not discovered until it was found in the New World on Columbus's 5th voyage in 1511. That is, Europeans did not encounter a rabid bat until more than 3 decades after the death of Vlad the Impaler. An article in a 2017 edition of Antiviral Research concludes that phylogenetic analysis suggests that rabies was present in the Americas prior to the first European colonizers, but was limited to bats and skunks. Canine rabies was, however, either non-existent or rare in the Americas and was introduced when Europeans imported new dog breeds to the continent. By the 18th century, methods of prevention, including promulgating rules for the keeping of dogs and the destruction of strays, mitigated risk and drastically reduced the incidence of rabies in many locations, although no progress had been made to cure those who had been bitten. The understanding of the nature of the illness continued to progress. In 1804, German physician Georg Gottfried Zinke showed that the disease could be passed from a rabid dog to a healthy one, and to rabbits and hens by injecting them with the dog's saliva. Still, a cure had not been discovered. One odd 19th century solution was the mad stone. History of Yesterday explains. These were gallstones, or stones found in the stomachs of various animals, formed from calcium deposits around a hair or other foreign object in the stomach. These stones were thought to draw the poison out of a fresh wound. Although the practice is thought to have originated in Europe, these became quite popular in the United States. The website Shelby County Today writes, for example, that in East Texas, there were resident madstones in Houston, Dallas, Plano, Corsicana, Denison, Kaufman, and a few other towns. These stones were owned and used by medical doctors, preachers, policemen, as well as private citizens. The famous Kaufman stone was kept, of all places, at the county treasurer's office. The stone would be heated in milk and applied to the site of the bite. In 1877, the Kansas New Era of Valley Falls, Kansas quoted T.C. Watkins of Murfreesboro, Illinois. "There is a madstone in this vicinity owned by Homer Sturdivant. That there is virtue in it I am positive, both in curing the bite of rabid animals and that of poisonous reptiles. I have seen it tested. The paper cites several examples and concludes, if all the madstones possess the efficacy ascribed to them, the bite of a rabid dog need not necessarily prove fatal, as has long generally been supposed. But the Davie Record of Mocksville, North Carolina expressed skepticism in 1912, writing, "Why, a madstone is just as good as a brickbat to prevent rabies." The paper writes off stories of madstones succeeding, opining not every dog that is supposed to be mad is really mad. Madstones notwithstanding, the illness continued to kill. In 1813, Charles Lennox, the Duke of Richmond and Governor General of Canada, died of hydrophobia after being bitten by a fox. In 1996, a group of doctors at a medical conference were presented a hypothetical set of symptoms and asked for a diagnosis. Their conclusion was that the person described as E.P., a writer from Richmond, died of rabies. The actual case was that of writer Edgar Allan Poe, who died in 1849, although the diagnosis cannot be confirmed. In 1868, Italian painter Giuseppe Abati died after being bitten by his own dog. In 1882, George Robertson Reeves, Speaker of the House of the state of Texas, died of rabies after being bitten while defending a child being attacked by a dog. As the disease progressed, he was locked in a room padded with mattresses to keep him from harming himself. When Viscount Hayes St. Ledger contracted hydrophobia in 1887 after being bitten by his pet fox, his housemates smothered him with pillows to spare him the ravages of the illness. The great breakthrough came in 1885. Since 1881, Louis Pasteur, who had already developed a successful vaccination protecting cattle from anthrax, worked on creating a vaccine to protect dogs from rabies. He first grew the virus in rabbits, then weakened it by drying the nerve tissue. Although it took decades before comprehensive vaccination programs were established, vaccinating pets has drastically reduced the number of people infected. In 1885, Pasteur used the vaccine on 9-year-old Joseph Meister, who had been mauled by a rabid dog. Pasteur could have been jailed for the experiment, as he was not actually a doctor, but went ahead, knowing that the boy would otherwise die. Dr. O'Neill writes, Joseph received 13 inoculations in 11 days and made a complete recovery. The word leaked out, and patients came streaming in the world over. At the time of Pasteur's death 9 years later, over 20,000 people had been given his post-exposure prophylactic vaccine.
Pasteur's vaccine is a type of treatment after exposure that's called a post-exposure protection, or PEP, although it could be given prior to exposure for someone who is, say, at high risk. But it must be delivered before the virus takes hold and symptoms appear in order to be effective. What originally took up to 20 shots has now been refined to require just 4 shots, and if it is delivered quickly, say within 10 days of exposure, it is nearly 100% effective.
Today, the World Health Organization estimates that an average of 59,000 people die of rabies worldwide each year, with most deaths occurring in Asia and Africa. While there are risks from wild animals, and particularly from bats in the Americas, dogs are responsible for 99% of rabies transmission to humans. The organization focuses both on prevention and in making PEP more widely available. In 2004, a protocol that uses sedation while administering antiviral medications produced the first person in U.S. history to survive rabies without prophylactic vaccination treatment, a 15-year-old girl. The protocol, however, has a low success rate. A 2017 study concluded that of 36 people treated, just 5 survived.
But the low success rate and high cost of the so-called Milwaukee Protocol means that it is at best a treatment of last resort, and that rabies continues to be one of the deadliest diseases known to man, still the scourge that it has been throughout history. As the Journal of Tropical Medicine and Infectious Diseases laments, clinicians who provide care to animals and patients with symptomatic rabies are as powerless today as their colleagues in Mesopotamia were 40 centuries ago. I hope you enjoyed this episode of The History Guy. Check out our community on thehistoryguideguild.locals.com, our webpage at thehistoryguy.com, and our merchandise at teespring.com, or book a special message from The History Guy on Cameo. And if you'd like more episodes on forgotten history, all you have to do is subscribe.